and welcome to The Point. It is Friday, March 18th, 2022. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN, Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the GBN Production YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20. Good morning once again to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9, whichever part of the world you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Hope you will have a good day, are having a good day, have had a good day. Welcome to The Point. Joining me virtually for this morning's discussion is the case manager at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, Dr. Debbie Neckles. Welcome her to the program. Good morning, Dr. Neckles, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and Blossom, and thank you so much for having me. Good morning to all your listeners.
It is a pleasure. So this morning we are going to be talking about the center, get a better understanding of the facility, its role in society, and I think the conversation comes at a time when a lot of people have been once again airing their concerns in relation to violence among our young people. But before we get into that, let's start with some of the basics. Just give us some information on the rehab center, how long it's been around, and the service or services it provides for the nation's youth, and by extension the nation, I should say.
All right. Well, the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center was established, I should say officially opened on March 24th, 2016. Okay, so we started in 2016. We're now in our seventh year of operation, or started our seventh year of operation. We received our very first resident on April 1st of 2016, so for a little bit there, we thought somebody was playing a little joke on us, because as you know, April 1st is it's Thankful Day, right? But we got our very first resident on that day, and since then, we have been receiving residents continuously. Now, one of the things I must point out is that juveniles, and we refer to the juveniles at the center as residents, right? They come to us through the court. I know that some persons refer to us as a home, but we're not a home. And that is something I need to establish right off the bat. We're not a home. A juvenile coming to the center must have been in conflict with the law, or in some cases in need of care and protection, but the case would have had to have gone through the courts. So it would have gone through the magistrate court or the high court. Now, in the case of those in care, in need of care and protection, that only goes through the high court, right? So it's only the high court that could grant an order, an emergency care order or care order to CPA that would allow a juvenile to be placed at the center, or sometimes we refer to the center too as Bacolet. So just to make it shorter, because you realize our name is really long. So I'll be going back and forth either saying the center or Bacolet. Now, as I said, a young person is in conflict with the law and between the ages of 12 and 18. So when at the age of 18, if you come into conflict with the law, you are sent to Her Majesty's prison. Now, you can have someone under the age of 18 being sent to Her Majesty's prison, but there are extenuating circumstances, right? So in a nutshell, Bacolet is for juveniles who are in conflict with the law or are in need of care and protection, and they come through the court to us. It's a secure facility, so we have 24-hour security and duty officers, and also, we provide everything that the resident will need once they're with us.
How has it been dealing with young, I don't want to call them offenders, but the people who come to the treatment, the young people who come to the treatment center? How has it been getting them to adjust to life within the center and to open themselves up to the services, the treatment that they can get?
Well, dealing with any person, be it a juvenile, an adult, so can be challenging. There are challenges, and there will always be challenges, because again, you're dealing with human beings. We all make our own choices, and we have to be in that frame of mind to accept the help, right, or the advice, or whatever it is, whatever the circumstances is. So there is no difference for a young person coming to the center, right? Now, keep in mind that a juvenile does something. So let's say he or she steals. goes before the court and they've been told that you're going to Bacalet. And remember, you can come there either on a sentence or remanded. So the terminology is the same whether you're a juvenile or an adult. So you can be on remand, and we know that remand is that you haven't been sentenced, but the court needs to know where you are so that you can come to court when it's time for you to be at court, so they can remand you. And that is fluid. It can be 2 weeks, it can be a couple of days, it can be a couple of months. So it's all dependent on the court, or you can be sentenced. Now, a sentence to Bacalet cannot be longer than 3 years. Okay? So if it's a case whereby the juvenile is turning 18 before the 3-year sentence is up, then they would have to be transferred to Her Majesty's prison. So I'm just giving that a little background before I get into answering the question. Now, it is challenging because if someone comes to us on remand, remember, we cannot put a firm plan in place for them. So we're just working as we have them. So sometimes we don't have enough time to reach that person in the manner that we need to, depending on what they come for, the program which they may have to go through, maybe a 6-week program, an 8-week program, a 12-month program, whatever it is. And they're there on remand. So it means that we cannot say, okay, well, we're going to do this for 3 weeks or 2 weeks. It's whatever time they're there. So that poses a challenge. Now, as relates to the individual, again, as I say, it is up to them. So a young person coming to us, we have to first establish rapport with them, right? And we have to get them to a point where they can buy into what it is we are doing. And if we cannot get them to buy in, you will not see any change. Because remember, change is on the person. We cannot change anyone. We can just provide the service, provide the environment, help them to change their way of thinking, and hopefully to see what their potential is and how they can make changes within themselves so as that they make better choices. But the decision at the end of the day is always theirs. And yes, they're young, but still the decision is always theirs, because we can't take them by the hand and say, you have to behave this way, right? So that poses a challenge. But again, this is what we do. This is the field we're in. This is what we've been trained to do. So we know how to deal with those things.
Is it that, how do you develop a program for each individual? Because like you say, you can only spend no more than 3 years, but there may be sentences which are less. But the program that you have for this specific person may be 6 weeks, but they've only been sentenced to 5. So how are you able to adjust the programs that you organize for each individual?
Before I answer that, let me just clarify. When I was talking about the time frame, I'm talking specifically to those who are on remand, right? Because as I say, someone can come in on remand, they come from court today on remand, they go back to court next week, and the magistrate decides to send them home.
Right.
So we cannot put a firm plan in place. Now, when a young person arrives at the center, one of the first things that we do when we do the intake, so we get all the basic information. We also get information from the probation unit, because keep in mind that this young person would have been known to probation, right? So the probation unit would have be working with this person. They will go out. They would also gather information on this young person. Now, when they come, we do a series of assessments or tests, which gives us an idea as to what that juvenile has been dealing with. So for example, one of the tests that we would do is called the CTQ, which is the Childhood Trauma Questionnaire. So it gives us an idea as to the kind of trauma that this young person may have experienced in their lives, right? So they may have experienced, let's say, neglect, they may have experienced abuse, be it physical or sexual, right? There are other tests that we do that speaks to their personality, that speaks to their behavior, all of that. So we do all of this, and coming out of that test, we would come up with an with a clinical diagnosis. And based on that, the clinicians, because we do have clinicians, our therapist at the center. And of course, you are very much familiar with Dr. Panchu, who is our resident consulting clinical psychologist. So we have a team which is referred to as the treatment team. So that treatment team is made up of the social worker, our 3 clinicians, Dr. Panchu and myself. And we will sit and if there's specific things that we need to discuss about that young person, we talk about it and chart the way forward as to what we're going to do. But each clinician is assigned a juvenile, so they have a number of cases. So let's say a new person comes to us, we do our assessments, they're assigned their clinician, and that clinician would prepare a treatment plan. So again, the treatment plan is based on the diagnosis. One of the things you would find that all of our residents, quite frankly, perhaps be diagnosed, for example, something called conduct disorder. So conduct disorder is presents itself in behaviors. So a young person who is continuously breaking the law, stealing, inappropriate behaviors, that sort of thing. So you find that that's a commonality around the residents. So based on, as I said, the clinical diagnosis, we put together a treatment plan, right? And one of the main therapeutic interventions that we use is cognitive behavior therapy. And what that does is focus mainly on changing the way that you think and see things. So they would engage not just in talk, but there may be other exercises that the clinician will engage them in. So you may be engaged in play, you may be engaged in art, you may be engaged in storytelling, all those different things. And all of that is aimed at changing the way that young person thinks, the way they go about making decisions, etc. So you work off their care plan, you work off their treatment plan. So every child comes in with a different, as I say, the commonality is conduct disorder, but in addition to that, there will be other underlying issues because there may be anxiety, there may be diagnosed with anxiety, they may be diagnosed with pedophilic behavior, they may be diagnosed with kleptomania, all those different things. So you have to deal with each child as an individual, and then you have the collective as well, because there's certain things we do as a group, because group sessions also play a role in helping to change, because when you're in session with your peers and you're interacting with your peers and you're hearing and seeing actions of your peers, and that way you yourself can start thinking, should I be doing this that way, or do I need to do it another way? So these are some of the things that we do in terms of treatment.
Have you ever had an instance of developing a plan for one of the juveniles, and let's say it's a 6-week program, but at the end of the 6 week you realized it hasn't helped? What takes place then?
Well, again, nothing is set in stone, because we're dealing with people, personalities, and I know sometimes we don't see children as having a mind of their own, but they do have a mind of their own. Now, again, if you try as much as possible to aid. So even if you work with that person for the length of time they're with us. So if, let's say, they're with us for only, let's use a 6-week period. If we know that what we have to do has to be an intense situation, right? It's intense program. So if at the end of the day we have not seen any changes within them, or any meaningful change that we know that they can probably sustain on the outside, there is really and truly nothing we can do in that moment, because remember, we cannot hold them for longer than they are placed with us. So if they're given a 1-year sentence, we do not have the authority, except if they're in a program that takes them beyond the the period of their sentence, then we can make a recommendation to the court for them to remain a little longer until that program is completed. Now, we have done that, and in situations for both sentence and remand, because somebody may come to us on remand and then we realize, okay, we need some more time, or there is a program that we can put them in. So, for example, aggression replacement therapy training art. That program is one that we run at the center from time to time. So if a young person is in that program and we know this is something that they need, even if they're on remand, we can make a recommendation to the court that they stay for the duration of the program. And in most cases, once we make our case, because of course we can't just go to the court and say we want them to stay, we have to make a valid case. And once that is done, then, in most cases, the magistrate or the judge will say, okay, fine, keep them there for the next, we will have them remain there until the program is over. Now, if we don't see any significant change, the most we can do is recommend a program on the outside, right? So we don't work in isolation. We work along, again, with probation. We work along with the reintegration unit out of the Ministry of Social Development, and we work along with the Ministry of Social Development on the whole. So if there is a program being run by the Ministry of Social Development, for example, that young person can continue in, we would make that recommendation. We also do outside community counseling. So one of our therapists from the center is also the community, will do community counseling with former residents of the center or other young persons who have come into conflict with the law, but they have not been sent to Bacalet, right? Because not everyone that comes into conflict with the law gets sent to Bacalet, right? There are other options. So we would recommend that they continue work with our community counselor, right? And maybe if it's a parental thing, probably engage the parents as well, probably have them as well, maybe attend parenting classes, whatever we need to do to ensure that we see some sort of significant change within that young person. But we have to keep in mind, I have to keep repeating, it may never happen. And that is something we have to be very mindful of. Because, sometimes you would hear a person say, but the child's been in counseling and we're not seeing any change, right? Counseling doesn't work like that. You can be in counseling or in therapy for your entire life and nothing changes, because if you as the individual is not yet ready to make that change, right? But again, we will do what we need to do. We will continue to work with them. So we would always find a way to continue that young person's treatment. Now, again, we do not have any control on what happens once they leave the center. So we have no way of insisting that they go to the community counseling unless we work with the court. So if their matter is still before the court, if they have a matter before the court, an additional matter before the court that has not yet been resolved, maybe as part of as part of dealing with that case, the magistrate can say, okay, you will need to attend counseling every week, right? But once they leave the center, we as an institution do not have any control as to what happens.
Speaking of, not everyone is open and to receive the treatment, give us an idea of the success rate of your programs. How often do you see, even if just the slightest change, do you see repeat offenders coming back to the center? Just give us an idea of how well the treatments are working.
But I must say our recidivism rate is very low. I cannot actually give you the percentage right now, but it's very low. Over the past 7 years, we've had, let's say, roughly maybe 250 persons coming through the center. Of that 250, you may have about 10 to 15 who are repeat offenders. So we have had a couple of them that came back to the center, but I need to point out here that a number of times when they come back, it's for the same offense. What I mean by that is the matter, they may have been placed back on remand, right? And when they went back to court, the magistrate would have said, okay, I am going to allow you to go home, but under these conditions, right? If you do not meet these conditions, you will go back to Bacalet, right? So you find that a number of them, that is what has happened. Okay, so for example, we've had, let's say, one juvenile who has been with, came to us for 5 times, right? So he was a 5th time a repeat resident. But when you look at the cases, it was a case of in about 2 of those times he was there, it was the same matter, because he was given conditions under which he would remain in the community, but did not follow through, right? So the magistrate had to, abide by his word and say, if you don't follow through, you go back. So that's what you have. Or you would have, again, persons who they were doing the exact same thing over and over. They go out and they may spend a couple, maybe even a year in some case, and then you hear that they're in trouble again and they come back. But that is extremely, for the past 7 years, is extremely low, right? We have had more successes than repeat in terms of Bacalet. We have had, though, a few persons who, maybe about, let's say about 5 of them, who would have gone on to engage in more serious offense and is now at Her Majesty's prison. So you do have that, right? But the number of residents that we have reached and have seen changes in and have stayed out of trouble have been far greater than those who have repeated or have gone on to Her Majesty's prison.
Earlier in the conversation, you noted that to become a resident at the center, you have to go through the court system. Have we had instances of whether it be parents saying, you know what, my child needs help, but we're not going through the court system? Have you had people try to bring their child or children to the center without going through the proper procedure? And what if it's a case of an 11-year-old who's just outside of the 12 to 18 range that the center facilitates?
Okay, now we have had, I think when we first opened, within the first year or so, we did actually have a parent who showed up, bag in tow and a child in tow. Now, my child is not behaving and I need my child to get into the center, and we had to explain that is not possible. So we have had persons too who have called and say, they want their child to come to the center because they're not behaving themselves, etc. But that's not how we operate, so that will not happen. If a child at 11 is in conflict with the law as it is written, and I may be subject to correction, but I believe that the reason why it's at 12 is because it is believed that under that age, a young person is not yet able to accept responsibility for their actions, right? Okay. So if a child at 11 gets into conflict with the law, the probation unit and the court would find different means. So they would do what we refer to as diversion. So they will get them involved in some other program. And there are a number of programs, within the ministry and so on that can be utilized, or they will also be, CPA will have to get involved in a case like that, and then they become a CPA client, and CPA would work with them in the family and the probation unit and etc. So basically that's what it is. But by our law and our mandate, we cannot accept anyone under the age of 12.
All right, we're speaking with the case manager at the Grand Bacalet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to get into the issue of violence among our youth, which has been a hot topic over the past few weeks. This is To The Point on Classic FM. We'll be right back.
Join GBN on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. for Interesting Grenadians, a program that showcases the lives of interesting and outstanding Grenadians at home and abroad. It's Interesting Grenadians every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on GBN. Don't you miss it.
Join GBN Television and K105 FM on March 22nd and 29th from 8 p.m. for the Antillean Life Health Forum, a new focus on health, a collective approach made possible by Antillean Life Insurance, Spice Isle Imaging Center, Gittins Healthcare, Grenada Planned Parenthood Association, Grenada Paper Products, Hubbard's Motor Department, 7 Seas, and the Grenville Credit Union.
That's not how you cross the pedestrian crossing.
Really? One day I just woke up and I saw pedestrian crosswalks on the road. No one really showed me how to use them properly.
Well, this is how it's done. You never cross before doing these things. They might save your life. First, when you get to the crosswalk, you stop. You look left, you look right. If there's a vehicle coming, you put your hand out, making eye contact with the driver, indicating that you want to cross. And only when the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you quickly cross to the other side.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross to the other side, then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
Welcome back to The Point, speaking with case manager at the Grand Baccalaureate Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, Dr. Debbie Neckles. Dr. Neckles, let's talk now about the hot topic in recent weeks, violence among our youths. This has been, to me, it has always been an issue, but I think it has resurfaced now with the advent of social media and footage going viral, whether it's here at home or abroad. But my question is, what role does the center play in helping these children? Yes, I know the juveniles come to the center through the court system, but in an instance where it's fighting on the streets and they don't get to the point of court to reach in the center, how can the center help?
Well, the center does not have a role per se to play, right, as part of its mandate. What we can do is work along with others, right? Because again, as I pointed out, what we do is when they come to us, and then we work with them when they leave us. Now we do have, as I said, our community counselor, right, who is also one of the persons at the center. So if needs be, through probation, we can get involved there in terms of providing, counseling sessions and so on. Now, what we have done, as I said, is work with others. So if our expertise are needed within the community, and let's say the probation unit calls on us, the Ministry of Social Development calls on us, we are there and we will assist in terms of actually taking the role and going out into the community and actually doing things per se. No, we don't do that, but we are involved. We would make suggestions. We would make phone calls. If we are called upon for assistance, we are there. Now, as I say, we work very closely with probation. We work very closely with the Ministry of Social Development. Now, there are times, and there have been times, where we have also worked with the schools, right? So take, for example, a couple of years ago, I think this was in the news, when 10 young persons were sent down to Baccalaureate at the same time. The magistrate, I think, had just had enough that day, and because of the violence that was happening in the school. Now, what we did in that instance was also work with the school. So we went to the school, met with the teachers, the principals, and we had sessions with them, all right? Providing guidance, providing, training on how to deal with different issues and so on. So that is how we play our role, right? But again, remember there are different institutions and there are different arms, of social development, and each of us have a role to play. But at the end of the day, because we're all working with the same population, we will come together, right? We will come together to work together. So you may not hear that X program is being facilitated by the center, but you can be assured that we may have had a hand in it. It may have been our suggestion, but we channel it through the right entity. Okay, because you don't want to be stepping on each other's toes, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So if X entity is the one responsible, we'll say, hey, how about we do this or we do that, or we're available to be of assistance to you in whatever way possible.
Has any thought been given to adjusting the mandate of the center? Because there's only so much you can do with the current responsibilities that you have now. But seeing the need to help maybe on a community level, go to the community or to help with the same youth violence, has any thought been given to adjusting the mandate?
Well, the thing is, and as you say that, I'm reminded of this. Part of our mandate, yes, and thank you for mentioning that, because it clicked in my head now. We do have a non-residential arm, right? Or we should. Let me choose my words carefully. We should have that. But again, staffing, we don't have the staff needed, to really do that fully. So we have to work with the other entities, as I say. Now, in changing our mandate, totally making changes to the way we function, I know we've had consultations on that, but again, that is above my pay grade. I cannot, the most you can do is probably make suggestions, but it takes a lot for any change, because remember, we are guided by the Juvenile Justice Act, all right? And, once, you have an act, the laws, and so there's a lot of steps to make changes, right? To anything. But again, as I say, we are, whether our mandate fully states it or not, once we see that there is a role we can play without, trampling on what someone else is already doing. Once we see that there's a role we can play in assisting, in working along with, in being a part of, because we all, as I say, we all work for the same population. We all were working to aid our youth, our young people. So once we see an opportunity, once an opportunity is open to us, once we're called upon, we are there. All right. And once we get the stuff that we need, there's so much more we can do. But again, I must say that we are doing quite well with what we have. And I think sometimes when you do well with what you have, the need for more is not fully seen, because it's looked on as, oh, you're making miracles, you have such little, you're like Jesus with the two fish, you turn it in and you feed the millions. So, you don't really need that much more. But when in truth and in fact, you need a lot more. So hopefully when we get the components of staffing and other things that we need, we can do so much more within the community. But right now we are working, as I say, with the different entities to do as much as we can.
I'm reminded of a situation, I think it was last year, recently, I'm not saying recently, maybe a year, 2 years ago, of some of the residents at the home, for lack of a better phrase, running away. And I remember this big hullabaloo of trying to find them and locate them. What measures were put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again? Because young boys, once they get together, they put plans in place, things may happen.
Oh, yeah. You would have that. We are a secure facility, right? So we have 24-hour security, we have 24-hour duty officers and so on. Now, residents cannot come and go as they please, but keep in mind, you are dealing with young people. Well, not even, adults too. Once you are placed in a situation where your freedoms are curtailed, there are times you're going to try to see if you can get out, right? And that will happen. And it happened then, it happened after that, and it will probably happen, in the future. Now, the measures are really and truly, being more, we have to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? More vigilant, right? But again, and whenever we figure out, because sometimes, you would get a whiff of the plan. So if you get a whiff of the plan, then we put measures in place to curtail that, right? Now, you have times where somebody may slip through, because again, we're dealing with people. You would always find a way to try to circumvent whatever you're in. So we cannot 100% stop that. But we have put measures in place. We're more stringent. We have, our security system, all of that would, and, you do continuous head counts. So at least you know where everyone is at any given time, right? And So those are the things that we do in order to make sure that persons do not abscond. But there's always going to be attempts, right? Again, because you leave home, you're in a situation where somebody's telling you when to go to bed, when to wake up, when to shower, when to eat, what your day is going to be like, right? You're in class from X time to X time. You're in counseling from X time to X time. You are in maybe a skills training course from X time to X time. You're in the garden. You see what I'm saying? So as a young person coming out, especially if you come out of a situation where you were allowed to do whatever it is you wanted to do, you come and go as you please at any time, and now you're in a situation like that, you will want to get out. But what ends up happening that is like after they try to get out, or after maybe they do run, once we have worked with them, they start realizing, you know what, where I'm at, I'm safe, right? I am being taken care of. I have somewhere to sleep, that sort of thing. So let me just behave myself. And sometimes they also know that when they engage in that sort of behavior, especially if they have to go back to court, that is something that goes into their report for court. So the threat now of the magistrate probably taking that into consideration when they could have been going home, it's stated that, no, you're going to remain there because it seems as though you haven't learned. And this particular statement I'm making is in reference to someone who's on remand. So they go back to court for their case, and magistrate may have considered, you know what, let me let you go home until your next court date. And you decide that you're going to either run away or attempt to run away. Magistrate may say, no, you're not ready to go home yet, right? So sometimes just the thought of that is enough for them to say, you know what, maybe I was planning to run away, but I'm not going to do it. But that is something, as I say, you're gonna, even though we are vigilant, even though we are watching them, we have 24-hour service, there are going to be times where you may miss someone, right? We're all humans. So I'm not going to sit here and make it sound as though, we're so perfect and we do everything, it happens. But thankfully that when it does happen, we work with the police, we work with the community, we find them and they return to the center, no harm done.
Viewers and listeners, this is the chance for you if you have any questions or comments for Dr. Neckles. The landline 435-2041. The WhatsApp is also 435-2041. You can also send in your questions on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page and the GBN Production YouTube channel. Dr. Neckles, speak to me in the meantime about parents, because I feel like that you find your different mix of parents. You have those who are, why isn't my child getting better with the services you provide? And then we have others that say, my child don't need no treatment, but the judge sent him here, so do all you're doing, but take all the time with my children. How do parents, or what role do parents play in how you roll out your programs? Because you have to deal with so many personalities.
Parents, I'm glad you asked that, because parents are extremely important. As a matter of fact, I would say they are the main, right? Parents are guardians, right? Because one, you would have some parents who would work with you They are very cooperative. They are really and truly interested in seeing a change in their children. They're just not paying lip service to it, right? Then there are those who are simply paying lip service to it. They just tell you what they think you want to hear, all right? Then there are those who are only interested in their children's well-being once they get to baccalaureate. Okay? So you have that mix. Now, when you have a parent, and we've had parents like this, who work with you, right? From the time their children get into trouble, they're working with probation. They're doing everything probation is asking them to do. If the child gets sent to baccalaureate, they're working along with us at baccalaureate, ensuring that, you know, they visit their children, they're in contact with them. Whatever it is we ask of them to do, they do it. And then once the child leaves baccalaureate, they continue working with the child, making sure that that young person goes to the counseling session, that they're attending school, etc. Now, those are the easy cases, right? Because when you work with a child at the center and that child has made significant changes, you only know if those changes are going to stick when they leave the center. Because remember, they're in a controlled environment. So you would seeing the changes is easy because you're in control, you're in a controlled environment. The test is when they leave the center. And what happens in a number of cases is that when they leave the center, they go back to life as normal. No changes have been made. So sometimes you recommend to parents, and again, we cannot force the parent to go to parenting classes, for example, or to come to counseling with the children. So we would recommend these things to them and nothing happens, right? Because they themselves don't see the need. It's like, I don't have a problem, you know, and it's he or she that's getting into trouble. Right? So why do I need to do X, Y, or Z? So when that young person leaves the center and goes back home, if they're going back home to no discipline, right? And discipline here, I'm not talking about picking up a strap and beating your child. I'm talking about laying down the law. You are to do X. If you do X, the consequence is Y, and you follow through. Right? You have curfew, you have, time to go and come. You ensure that they attend school, that they're going to school. You work with the school, right? All of this. If you don't have that, right, when the child gets back home, then whatever changes you would have seen doesn't really last that long because they don't have the support at home. Right? And if there are no changes in the environment in terms of, if let's say, for example, you do have families who are suffering, right? So the parents may not be able to provide adequately, maybe a meal, even proper housing. And you see changes at back, but then they get back and they can't get a proper meal. What do? They go back to steal. Because we've had children who came to us for stealing, and what they stole was food to eat. Right? It wasn't because, they were envious of somebody's things and they took it, they were hungry. So if they go back into that situation, right? Or if they go back into an abusive household where they're being told that they're not wanted, where they're being beaten, where they're being sexually molested, right? Now, you will not see that change sustained. So that, parents, it's hard and it's difficult sometimes to get them to work with us. It's difficult sometimes to get them to make the change that they need to. And sometimes they want to, but they can't. Because the parents themselves are dealing with so many issues. A lot of parents have gone through trauma from the time they were young that was never dealt with. Right? So because they have never dealt with what's happened to them. So take, for example, you have a young person who come to us, and in the case of going through their case and finding out more about them, you realize that they were, let's say, sexually abused, right? You speak to the parent, and then you find out that their parent was also sexually abused. Right? And they may have had siblings so you see, it's generational, right? And if it was never dealt with, if that parent never stopped and say, never got the help, because sometimes people go through things, and rather than those around them helping them is like, oh, you need to get over that. Right? And sometimes it's masked and you think that they have gotten over it, but they haven't. So different things are triggering them. So they themselves have not dealt with their issues. How are you then expecting them to deal with the issues of their children? You understand? So there is a lot going on. So you do have the parents who may want to change, may want to help, may want to work with you, but they don't know how. So now you have to work with the parents and the child at the same time to get them to that vein. And then you have some parents who, I am going to say, do not care, right? They have the capacity, they understand, but it's just too much work for them, right? Or as some of them may say, I have my life. What about me and my life? He or she old enough, they could do, they're old enough to understand and they're old enough to do better without trying to understand what the child is really going through. So sometimes when we see our young people getting into trouble, we need to look past them. We need to look past what and see what is going on in the home, what kind of relationship they have with their parents, right? And when we talk about relationship with their parents, I'm sure you've heard of attachment theory, right? And that bond that a child would form with a parent or guardian or that main caregiver in their lives, that gives them the script of how to navigate their lives. So if you have formed a script that is negative, right? You don't have that bond. You don't find security in that relationship with your parent. Of course, you're not going to make wise decisions. Now, maybe along the way, someone may come into your life and turn your script around, and that has happened. And that's maybe a baccalaureate, that may be a probation worker, that may be an auntie, a cousin, it may be a police officer who has befriended you, it may be a teacher. That person may come into your life and change that script so then you can make good decisions. But parents need to understand, and and I can't say this enough, that their role is so important in their child's life, or their lack thereof, lack of role play, being involved in their child's life is so important to the decision-making process and to the choices and the behaviors. Because a lot of the violence that you're seeing, I'm sure maybe if you dig deeper, these children are dealing with violence in the home, or they have seen their parents or persons that they look up to solve their problems with violence, right? So for them, that's the way to do it. So we have to look past the child sometimes and see what else is going on, or look past the behavior that the child is exhibiting in the moment and see what is going on.
Let's go to the phone lines. Okay, we lost that caller. Based on what you've been saying about the parents, one question on the Facebook, somebody asks, the center may not be able to get the parents into counseling, but can the courts order parents into counseling?
Again, I may be subject to correction, but from my understanding, there is nothing that the court can do, except, let's say, the parent themselves were involved in the incident, then, and they're before the court, then the magistrate or the judge can say, as part of, this is what happened. But there is nothing, I don't think there is any law where the magistrate can say or order the parent to attend counseling, and they have to. Right? It may just be, something, because the parent should be in court with their child when the child shows up to court, right? The parents are always should be in attendance. So it could be something that the magistrate can say to them, all right? But there is nothing that can force them. The magistrate or the judge cannot force them. And again, I'm saying this, and as I say, I'm subject to correction, but that I think I'm correct in saying that you cannot force a parent to attend counseling if they themselves is not part of the matter.
WhatsApp question, somebody's asking, can the center recommend that the child or the juvenile not be placed back in the home, which may be causing the behavior? So if it's something at home, right?
We can make recommendations. We can recommend, but we cannot enforce. Right? What we do, however, is we try to work with. So, for example, we would work with the reintegration unit and see what we can do to prepare that home. So. let's say if it's a case where, because we've had situations like that where the parent had to attend parenting classes and that sort of thing, and the parents would have done that, right? What we have done in other instances, we would have tried to find an alternate home, because when we don't have any control. And I have to say that if the child is on remand, right, we don't have control over that. We would make the recommendation, but we don't have the time frame within which to do certain things. Now, if a child is sentenced to us, we know that this child is here with us for the next 3 months for sure. We know that. So what we do, we have case conferences. And in that case conference is when we plan for when they leave the center, right? So if we know a child is leaving the center, let's say in August, right? Come May, June, we get together. So all entities, CPA, reintegration, police, prison, everybody, we come together and we have a meeting and we plan. So if it's a case that we know this home is not the best home for this child, in the interim leading up to the child's release, we try to find an alternate placement for that person. All right, but again, we can place the child in that alternate placement, but if there is nothing from the court, and you see, because of how things are done, we can say, okay, the child would live with this person, right? And we can agree, and the parent may agree to it because they know the home is not suited, and they can agree to it in the meeting. But when the child leaves the center, unless maybe CPA was involved and got an order that places the child with in that alternative situation, there is nothing that says the parent can't go and take the child, or nothing that says the child cannot leave that alternative home and go back to the parent. Because you have to keep in mind, even though the home may be abusive, even though the child may be going through a lot of trauma at home, children, even in that situation, still long to be with their parents. Right? Still long to be in their home, in the familiar environment. So we on the outside looking in may be like, well, why the child want to go back there? But that is what is familiar. That is what they know, right? You take them and put them somewhere and they have that yearning, that urge. They want mommy, they want daddy, they want that love and affection. It may be a negative love, in a negative way, but that is that's the attention they're longing for. Okay. So again, unless there is a court order, we can't say you have to stay there, but we can make the recommendation or the suggestion.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. Good morning, caller.
Morning, Doc. I was in a conversation recently with two gentlemen. Both of them had children who ended up in. And one dad was saying that his daughter, one is a daughter, one is a son, who ended up there. And one dad was saying that his daughter said to him, "Dad, I'm not going back in this place ever again." Just because of the fact that her freedom to move about as she liked to do was curtailed. So that you could have the effect by just simply incarcerating, and if you might use that word, where they are limited in movement. But relative to the issue of parents being counsel in such a situation, I think they should make it technically mandatory, so that the environment that a child has to go back into, most times, the parents need to know how to adjust to help that child to develop or move their attitude and so on that was, consistent before they ended up there. I could safely tell you that I came back in Grenada about 2012, and one of the persons from that house that somebody gave me a story to, and I was told about it by more than one person, where the mother especially, the kind of things that the mother used to look at on TV with children, it was inevitable so that the children would turn out that way. And you're talking about girls. So I think that you have to find a way to get the parents to understand the kind of behavior that you don't practice around children. Adult behavior is adult behavior, children behavior is children behavior. And on top of that too, a lot of parents, they respond to a simple thing a child might do. It's so exaggerated and so traumatic to the child that the child is abused simply. Sometimes like you said earlier on, the child might take something because they're hungry.
Okay.
But if you don't create a situation where you eliminate hunger normally, the child will always be hungry and want to go and take somebody thing.
Okay.
You have that kind of problem that the parents need to understand these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Dr. Neckles?
Thank you. Yes, and yes, he's correct in that, parents need to understand, that their behaviors affect, their children. Maybe one day we'll get to the stage where there is a law in the books, that would give the court or so the authority to send parents to counseling in relation to their children's behavior. But for now, we work with what we have. And I think too, it's a case of changing mindsets, because a lot of it is cultural. We believe in certain things and we believe in certain ways, and trying to make that shift sometimes can be difficult because, you come with your ideas and sometimes you hear, but that is not a Grenadian thing. It's an American thing or European thing or whatever. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize we look at it in a cultural context, yes, but we're dealing with behaviors. And there are some behaviors that are universal, but we can take what we've learned with others and apply it. And we're seeing that from the research and from just working with parents and children, that we need to have that shift, right? The way we think, that paradigm shift in the way we think, in the way we interact with our young people, the way we engage them. Sometimes we don't want to listen to them. Now, we may not agree with what they're saying to us, but sometimes we just need to give them the opportunity to speak. You have your child and you want them to do X, and they're going to do X, but they are pushing against it. Maybe just give them the opportunity to say why they don't want to do X. But once you've listened to them, they know, okay, you're going to do X. And chances are they'll probably do X a lot quicker if you give them that opportunity to just say why they feel they don't want to do X. So sometimes we have to give our children a voice, and getting parents to understand that, getting parents to understand how imperative their role is in their child's life. It's going to take some work, but we can do it.
Final thoughts, Dr. Neckles, as we close the program.
I just want to encourage, persons out there, those who especially who are working with our young people. And I know what we have been seeing can be very alarming. And, we're ready to say that, Grenada is on a downward slide. But it's how should I say? It's a symptom of a deeper issue. There are a lot of us that are hurting, and I know a lot of the aggression and so has been even the pandemic and being in lockdown and all of that has exacerbated how we behave and all of that. So let us not lose hope, right? Let us look. Yes, the situations are bad, the violence is bad, but as you said, Blossom, in the beginning, we had a spate of violence like that before when we had the youth gangs, and we were hearing a lot about them. So maybe what we need to do, maybe take a step back, look at what we did differently in that situation, and see how what we used to fix it then can be applied to now. And then also look at the other things that are going on within the environment. Because I always say that, the children of yesterday are basically the same as the children of today. The environment has changed. What they have to deal with has changed, right? So social media, that whole instant gratification that we seem to want, that is something that we have to deal with. So yes, the violence is bad. Yes, it saddens us when we see our young people behaving like that. But we need to look also at ourselves, right? As the adults in the community, in the environment, as the parents in the environment, the teachers, the police officers, the persons in charge. What are we showing showing to the young person? What are we showing to them? What sort of behaviors are we putting on display for them, right? Are we simply saying, you have to have respect, but then we are disrespecting in their presence? Or are we telling them to have respect and then we're disrespecting them, right? Are we telling them not to be violent, but then we're using violence against them, right? So we have to look at the whole. We cannot just take part of it and push aside the rest. We have to look at this as a whole, okay? Yes, we want our young people to be respectful. Yes, we want them to be on their best behavior. I don't want to see them come into Bacalet, right? But again, we have to work with everybody. So parents, know that you have a role to play. Know that you have an important role to play. Do not condone the negative behaviors of your children, and applaud them when they're doing things that are positive. Don't ignore it. Don't treat it as though it's an expectation. Treat it as, something that they're doing, and they're doing well because you want them to continue to do that. And we as individuals in a society, maybe we need to get back where we're not afraid to pull up on a young person if we see them not doing something right. We're not afraid to say to a parent respectfully, maybe you need to handle this situation differently. We need to get back to that village aspect. All right, it takes a village, right? And I think if we do that, we would see some changes in what's going on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neckles. Appreciate your appearance on the program this morning. Interesting and a very educational conversation this morning. So thank you very much. And I'm sure the viewers and listeners also learned a thing or two, especially about the operations of the center. So appreciate your explanations. And I want to wish you a blessed day and an enjoyable weekend.
Thank you so much, and same to you, Blossom. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. Enjoy. That was Dr. Debbie Neckles, caseworker at the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. We thank her very much. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for tuning into To The Point this morning. Always appreciate your listenership and your viewership. That's the end of my time with you for today. Mid-morning Buzz is up next. I believe JC is in the building, and he should be making his way into the studio in short order. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have yourselves a safe weekend. Please be safe. Don't drink and drive. Don't drive and drink. Don't text and drive. Don't drive and text. Don't walk or drive and litter. Have yourselves a blessed and enjoyable, fantalocious Friday.